Okay.
It's just loading here. Okay.
Okay, call to order of the regular meeting of council of April the 21st, 2020, 4:40 p.m. We'll take a moment for a moment of silence. Moving on to item number 2, approval of the agenda. One noted item, item 6.10, frontline recommendation, recognition recommendation request has been removed from the agenda. Megan,
Okay.
go ahead with the motion.
We also have one addition to the agenda.
Yes.
So the motion will be moved by Stacy White, seconded by Patrick Adams. Be it resolved that the agenda for the regular meeting of council held April 21st, 2020, beginning at 4:40 p.m. be approved as circulated to all members of council with the removal of item 6.10 entitled Frontline Workers Appreciation Signage, and with the addition of memo-dev-001 entitled Delegation of Authority to Premier Avenue Demolition Permit to be the new 6.10.
Just one moment. Okay, duly noted. All in favor? Approved, unanimous. Declaration of pecuniary interest. Councillor Ivanov.
Heritage North. I have a rental facility, so I guess that puts me in conflict.
Please record that into the minutes. It will be recorded as noted. Thank you. Petitions and delegations. None noted. Acceptance of the minutes and recommendations. Motion.
Moved by Rick Owens, seconded by Dennis Perrier. Be it resolved that council accept the minutes of the following meetings. Minutes of the regular meeting of council held April 7th, 2020.
All in favor? Approved. Unanimous. Reports of municipal officers and communications. COVID-19 update. CAO, Richard McGee.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Council, my remarks will be brief this afternoon, and then we will turn the floor over to Nancy Loach from TPR to report on the Tech Pioneer residence status, Bonnie Sackrider, who is leading the communications throughout this process, Keith Gorman, who is leading the operations portfolio, and finally, we're going to have Wilf Hawes, Director of Economic Development, provide results from the recent survey that was done from a regional perspective specific to Kirkland Lake. The one item I want to highlight, Your Worship, is the recent release and comments by Premier Doug Ford with respect to the province starting to look at the reopening of the province as a result of what they're declaring as the peak of the cases. Now, we want to recognize the fact that this is good news, but we also want to recognize the fact that we must remain vigilant in our efforts to prevent the spread of COVID-19. And until the province gives the all clear, we want to continue to use best practices, use physical distancing to prevent the spread, and maintain that effort in accordance with the recommended best practices from the province. So with that said, we're going to turn it over to Ms. Loach to give an update from TPR. Ms. Loach.
Thank you. Your worship and council, over the past several weeks, long-term care has received many guidance documents, directives, and orders from the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care regarding COVID-19. Management and staff have worked collaboratively to initiate all directives and orders. Currently, the following measures are in place to reduce the risk of COVID-19. We are closed to visitors. Residents who are at end of life may have one visitor, which will be determined case by case. We are no longer allowing families to drop off care packages, as this increases the risk of transmission of the virus. Screening of all staff, contracted personnel is occurring twice daily. Screening of all residents is occurring twice daily, as well as at point of care risk assessment, which are completed by registered staff with any resident interaction. Universal masking for all staff and contracted personnel. Each employee contracted personnel must wear a procedure mask at all times during their shift, with the exception of break time, whereby they can remove their mask and maintain social distancing. Staff cohorting is in place to reduce the risk of spreading the virus from unit to unit. Employees can only work at one long-term care home. Those who work at other long-term care homes have chosen to work only at Tech Pioneer. Social distancing has been maintained for residents during meals and when together for activities. New admissions from hospitals have been suspended. Processes are in place to mobilize additional PPE when we are down to a 14-day supply. I submitted an intake form to Ontario Health North yesterday for more procedure masks. Weekly calls from compliance inspector occur every Wednesday to assess current situation and the need for resources. To date, we've had 4 residents tested, all who have been negative. 1 was a new admission, therefore automatically swabbed. 2 had gone to the emergency department for an assessment, so they needed to be swabbed. And 1 resident developed respiratory symptoms in the home. All of these residents were placed on 14 days of isolation. The isolation measures remain in effect even though the negative swab results were received as per provincial guidelines. Procedures are also in place for contact tracing in the event that we have a positive case. Custodial staff from the complex have worked at Tech Pioneer for the past 2 weeks, providing additional support to complete deep cleaning. Their assistance was greatly appreciated. We've received many generous donations from the community to assist us during this very difficult time. These donations have been truly overwhelming. We have been acknowledging these donations via our Facebook page, along with official letters. Lastly, I want to take this opportunity to inform you of the sudden passing of one of our RPNs, Nikki Smith, on April 14th. Nikki was in the role of full-time Behavioral Support Ontario RPN, a shared position between Tech Pioneer and Extendicare Kirkland Lake. Nikki was a bright light, bringing valuable guidance to staff and families for residents with dementia. She touched many lives, both residents, families, and staff, and will be greatly missed by all. Our condolences go out to her husband, Lee, and daughter, Larissa. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Loach. Ms. Sackrider.
Can I just make a comment before we go to Bonnie? Nancy, on behalf of council, I'm sure I can convey this message. Keep up the great work. These are difficult times. The staff and your leadership has been exemplary. Much appreciated. Matter of fact, today my wife was out getting groceries and 2 people came up within distance, with distanced, I should say, and mentioned to thank you folks at Tech Pioneer for making arrangements quickly, getting out of the gate to prevent the spread of this terrible disease. And it's really appreciated around town. So please pass that message on to your staff and management. Any other comments? Okay, go ahead, Bonnie.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have hit the 1 month mark since the province of Ontario has declared what services are essential, and this has resulted in the closure of municipal buildings to the public. Staff have been working hard to ensure all essential services are provided with the least disruption to the residents of Kirkland Lake. Staff are reviewing recommendations daily from the World Health Organization, Health Canada, the Ontario Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care, and the Timiskaming Health Unit. The health and safety of our employees and the residents of our town is paramount, and we have been implementing legislation, guidelines, and best practices. Staff have been redeployed in various areas to meet the needs that have evolved, such as what Nancy Loach from TPR has just mentioned, custodial staff assisting at Tech Pioneer. We also have a custodial staff at the airport after medevac flights. Heritage North is now being utilized as a drive-through screening venue. Communication is vital and accomplished with staff and council through daily email updates, with the general public through press releases from the mayor, and through information posted on social media sites, as well as advertising by radio and print. In the words of Dr. Teresa Tam, the Chief Public Health Officer of Canada, we must remain vigilant, stay focused, and keep our eye on the ultimate goal, to stop the spread of COVID, to crush the curve, and to protect our families, friends, and fellow Canadians. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sackrider. Mr. Gorman.
Thank you, Rick. Facilities continue to remain closed to the public. In most instances, we're operating in a fairly routine fashion. Well, we have had some modifications to scheduling and have had to redeploy staff to support essential services, which both Nancy and Bonnie has touched on. We do have a small contingent of staff that are working remotely, and we have been encouraging the utilization of vacation balance drawdowns in some instances. Staff have been taking the numerous offerings that have been presented by the AMCTO, the MFOA, and other areas around crisis and the impact that COVID could have on municipal operations to continue to gain knowledge and share with our peers to better understand the impact of this going forward. We continue to monitor and look for funding opportunities for municipalities, but thus far, they have been fairly limited in nature. I'm happy to report that the initial waiving of penalties appears to have been well received by the public and was taken advantage of by the residents. Just to put it in perspective for you, the March installment, we had approximately 950 people who were late with their tax bills. And if we had performed a similar calculation on the April one, we would have had 1,275. So it's a sharp uptick on the number of people who have utilized and taken advantage of that.
Thank you, Mr. Gorman. And as we look toward hopefully what will be a recovery sooner rather than later, Your Worship, Mr. Hawes has been working diligently with his economic development counterparts to collect data and information and prepare our community for an economic return. Mr. Hawes.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, the results of the April business survey have been compiled and are being released tomorrow. The survey was conducted by the town and its local and regional partners between April 6 and 14. The purpose was to get a better understanding and quantify the impact of the pandemic on local and regional economies. We assume that there will be recovery programs released in the future that may target businesses, communities, and regions. We need to have the information in hand if we are to successfully tap these programs on all three levels. 72 KL entities responded to the survey. The results are provided in a PDF that will be distributed on the website as well as through the media. Highlights are as follows. 32% indicated that it could put them out of business. 36% indicated that the pandemic is going to significantly impact their finances. 26% said that although it may impact them financially, they are confident that they can weather the storm. 3% indicated that it has no impact on their long-term business prospects. As we know, the pandemic has hit the workforce hard. 42 of the survey respondents reported layoffs. Those layoffs represent 129 full-time, 141 part-time positions, 11 contract positions, and 5 seasonal jobs. Respondents were asked what they felt the community could do to help them. They stated, avoid using cash, shop less frequently, and place larger orders when you do. Show your support on social media or by buying ahead, gift cards, etc., and advocate on their behalf to reduce operating costs. Next steps will include a survey at this point scheduled for May 11th. That will very likely focus on the impact of government assistance programs. How accessible are the programs? How well are they understood? How well are they used? And what are the shortcomings? We are developing a district and regional profile using the same survey. Information from the survey will be shared with our regional municipal councils, agencies, MPs, and MPPs. Hopefully this will help our region develop a recovery plan that can be more unique to Northern Ontario as opposed to a general Ontario rural and remote one. I'd like to thank the following for their cooperation and assistance: the Far Northeast Training Board, KDCDC, Chamber of Commerce, and the Employment Options Office. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hawes. Your worship, that concludes our update. If I could reinforce that it is critically important that every resident of Kirkland Lake continue to show vigilance to crush, as Ms. Sackrider said, the COVID-19 virus and prevent the spread of it until the all clear is given by the medical officers of health. We're pleased to answer any questions. We'll do our best to provide the answers, Your Worship.
Thank you. Item 6.3.
Sorry, Your Worship. Would you like me to read the motion for the COVID update?
Sorry, I didn't realize it was one. Go ahead.
So a motion moved by Eugene Ivanoff, seconded by Casey Owens. Be it resolved that the verbal update titled COVID-19 update be received.
All in favor? Unanimous, passed. 2020 budget update. Treasurer Keith Gorman.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Council. I just wanted to take a few minutes to briefly update you guys on the 2020 budget. As you were aware, we had indicated a preliminary schedule, and we are behind that, but I want to assure you that the budget is progressing well. Initially, when we released those timelines, we did feel they were aggressive, but I felt it was important to stress early deadlines to get the foundation and the process started. The operations group has worked very well. They were responsive, open to new ideas, and supportive of new processes. We had a strong momentum going into mid-March, but with the timing of COVID and other circumstances, staff began to focus efforts onto other more critical, pressing areas. I think it's important that we gain and build processes that will last and shape the future budget process and deliberations. And as such, we've taken the extra time rather than racing to finish. This will be a critical document for benchmarking operations going forward.
I've lost
Sorry?
I've lost the verbal, the audio.
Okay, has anybody else?
It just blipped in and out with me, but back on.
Okay. Just continuing on, I think it's important that we use this document for benchmarking operations, and that's sort of the emphasis on it is, we'd rather quality product than a rushed product. The pause allowed us to have some transition in the leadership and has allowed for Rick to provide some input and guidance, which will help shape the process also going forward. I think this is an important aspect to ensure the buy-in of the team and reduce future changes. It's also allowed for myself to better grasp challenges and structure municipal finances and limitations within the systems. To update you on our current status, capital submissions have all been completed and are now in the financial and management review stage. There were a substantial number of projects that have been put forward. We're looking at approximately 50. Management intends to review and focus on availability of resources, including both staff, time, physical capabilities, as well as financial aspects to help prioritize these deliverables prior to putting them forth to council. The expectation is that we will have these reviewed and finalized for recommendation towards the end of April. Preliminary operating budgets have also been drafted for most operating areas. We are still awaiting the financial management and review stage, and we are currently modifying scenarios to have potential impacts of COVID. Internal meetings between finance and the departments are likely to be completed over the next 2 weeks. In light of everything going on with the current pandemic, public consultation and council input's proving to be a bit more of a challenge than we initially thought it would have been. The intention is to create a budget page within our town website where we'll upload budget presentations and supporting documentations for review. We'll likely collect input through an online form as well as emails, and we'll likely place these submissions onto an online Q&A section in efforts of minimizing duplication of questions and comments where possible. We'd like to take both council meetings in May to prepare and provide brief presentations, including May 5th, focused on capital expenditures, and May 19th on operating expenditures, to help ease everybody and help them understand the materials that are put forth. And then we intend to have special meetings occurring likely the week after each of those to specifically address each of those budgets. The hope and the intent is to wrap up the second special meeting with a recommendation of budget approval at a regularly scheduled council meeting in June. We'll draft up a schedule that's been revised, circulate it to the broader group, and then also post it on that budget page within the website. Are there any questions?
Councillor Owen.
Yeah, not all our ratepayers are online. So is there any mechanism for them to ask their questions or have input?
We can take that back and look at some considerations to see. We'll also sort of look at some other municipalities to see how they're handling that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate this is not business as usual and there may be no answer. But I would appreciate if you could just see if there is some way that we could accommodate so that no resident can come up to me or any other councillor or the mayor and say, I didn't have a chance to be heard when the budget was being prepared.
We could probably have them phone the office and then we can mail them the budget or that kind of thing, the documentation.
Okay, thank you, Keith. I appreciate that.
But I think there's some ways we can get around it for sure.
Great, thank you.
No problem.
A couple of comments or one comment, one question. As Councillor Owen said, this is different circumstances this year with COVID. Again, we are going to be late in the process on the budget. Hopefully, with these new measures that we put in place from an administration standpoint, we will be able to get a kickstart going for 2021, but that's a long way off. But I think that's our ultimate goal. Also, I mentioned to our CAO this afternoon or yesterday about KL Solar Project. I realize we don't have financial reports from them yet, and I believe our auditors are going to be the same auditors are going to be used for KL Solar. It would be nice to have some indication from them as to will there be a disbursement to shareholders like ourselves. So we have an idea in planning going forward for our budget. Even a yes or a no it might be difficult for them to give you a dollar amount that they can stand by right now. But I would ask that you make communication with them to see if that is a possibility, or a yes or no answer would be at least appreciated.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. We have had active communications with KL Solar, and the actual intent is to provide you guys with routine updates on that on a quarterly basis. They have provided some numbers for preliminary budgeting purposes, so they will be included in our operating budget.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay, we'll move on to 6.3. Treasurer Gorman.
I think the clerk has a motion on that as well, Your Worship.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead with that motion.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by Patrick Adams, seconded by Rick Owen. Be it resolved that the verbal update titled 2020 Budget Update be received.
All in favor? Approved, unanimous. Item 6.3, financial and key performance indicators. Treasurer Gorman.
Okay. And before Keith gets going, through your worship, I'm going to attempt to share my screen here so that we can go through it together. And I'm just going to see if I can get this to work.
Okay.
Do you see anything on your end?
I see the agenda.
Okay, but I don't see it on the live stream yet. Let's see.
Yeah.
Okay, but so unfortunately, it's not showing on the live stream. Oh, here we go. There we go. Okay, perfect. Okay, sorry about that, Keith. Go ahead. I've got it here. So you feel free to direct me as you give your report.
Thank you, Megan. Apologies. We just thought it might be easier to work through the report quickly with it on screen. Your Worship, through you to Council. I just want to sort of talk a little bit about the process. This is sort of a working version of our KPI, financial quarterly report, with the intention to evolve in time, with time and more availability of data. We'd actively encourage input and directive from Council for items that you believe would add value or insight to the operations of the municipality. In compiling this document, it helped identify some challenges and areas for improvement, as along with some gaps in the systems. And that was a common recurring theme almost across all departments. We hope that the report will provide some insight to both operational and financial challenges that are being faced, which will hopefully allow us opportunity to correct or remediate problems before they continue to compound. As a management team, we intend to utilize a similar format and process for internal review on a monthly basis, which will likely in time improve the quality of the quarterly product going to Council. I want to caution everybody that the financials in this report need to be viewed as essentially a snapshot at a particular point in time, that the numbers will continue to change, and that the processes internally will need to be established to better improve the reliability of the figures. And what I'm getting at with that, just not to scare anybody, is we don't have a hard firm close on quarter ends or month ends. So we do actively post after, I've pulled the data to basically populate the financial aspects of this report. So it's just like, as at a snapshot in time, the data will be different. But we're fairly comfortable that at that point in time, which would have been around April the 16th, that the data captures, the full intent of the quarter with some nominal changes expected in it. So Megan, if you could just jump to the first slide, which would be cash sources. Taking a rather simplistic approach, I thought we could look at money coming in, money going out. Cash sources essentially saw the municipality bringing in approximately $5.1 million in Q1 of 2020. And as a comparative, we did about $5.7 million in Q1 of 2019. As you're looking at the table, Grants would be far and away the largest decrease that we're seeing year over year. And that's largely attributable to the one-time modernization funding received in Q1 2019. Not to touch on every line within the report, I think we should just tack on and touch on a couple areas that we are seeing favorable increases year over year, and a couple that we're seeing unfavorable increases year over year. So in the instances of TPR, our water, utilities, and economic development, we are seeing significant upticks for the reasons identified over towards the right. TPR will have a separate visual just because we wanted to break out, there was a number of contributing factors. When looking at waterworks, the 18% increase is largely consistent with that rate increase that we saw mid-year in 2019. And in the area of economic development, it's largely attributable to the ecom timber revenues that we received in Q1. If we're looking at a couple of the areas where we're tracking unfavorable in revenues year over year, I think we'd focus in on recreation in particular, where you can see it has decreased significantly. We will have sort of a visual a couple slides down just to sort of speak to that. And then public works. And the public works one, what I'd basically essentially chalk this up to is accounting allocations. And so it looks like historically we were charging out equipment internally, which was recognizing revenue per se for public works at the cost of other departments. And in 2019, we ceased to do that. In 2020, we do not intend to do that as well. So Megan, if you could just jump to the second slide, which would be operating expenditures. Oh, sorry. Quickly, I'll walk you through these waterfall charts. And so what this essentially does is the intent here is to show you the change from Q1 of 2019 to Q1 of 2020. So you can see the significant ins and outs. And so this is a waterfall chart. And you can basically see that there's a couple of things that have contributed more revenue to TPR than historical. One of them being a COVID grant. We did receive $75,000 in funding, of which half was received in March. And TPR has also seen an increase in case mix funding year over year. Outside of that, they've lost in a couple areas, primarily physiotherapy. If you could just jump down to the recreation center for a quick second. This next graph basically shows you the change in how we go from $196,000 in revenue to 140 in a quarter over quarter. And so you can see a big chunk of this is actually tied to one-time grant revenues that the Recreation Department received in Q1 of 2019 that we didn't receive again in Q1 of 2020. And outside of that, we are seeing some decreases in revenue across essentially all areas of operating streams within the recreation center. So we are seeing decreased pool admissions and rentals, a decreased revenue base for fitness memberships, as well as ice rentals. Looking at things from an expenditure side of things, again, just cautionary that these numbers will change. And so it's sort of the whole don't count your chickens before they hatch. And where I'm pointing out with that in particular is transportation services, which is showing the largest decrease, basically quarter over quarter. And where we could go wrong with this number that we're putting forward is there could be various invoices that are out for approval or in the queue to be approved, or we may have had contractors that are late to invoice, and we may not have accurately captured them in at that point in time. And so while encouraging to see a decrease in costs around snow removal, we just don't want you to count on that full $200,000 in case more invoicing were to come through. Talking about some of the unfavorable aspects that we're seeing, we are seeing a sharp uptick on protective services, particularly within the fire department, which did see an uptick on labor costs, Q1 2020 versus Q1 2019. Favorable, we're seeing the decreased costs within the recreation center. And that's, when I say recreation center, I should caution that we've grouped things like the FIR statement. And so part of that would include cultural services, which includes Hockey Heritage North, which we've now paid off the loan, so we don't have $95,000 of loan payments and interest tied in. And that's the largest driver of the decrease there. And then within planning and development, we would have been capturing in Q1 2019 significant expenditures associated with the 100th anniversary, which we obviously did not incur in Q1 of 2020. So it is encouraging to see costs down slightly at this point in the year versus 2019 at this point in the year. But like I said, just to proceed with a little bit of caution in particular. If we can jump to the next slide quickly. For our wastewater or water utilities, largely consistent quarter over quarter. One of the things that is driving this down right now, we've not booked our internal allocations of program support for 2020, whereas 2019 would have had those within. And then lastly, we wanted to break out some of the capital expenditures that we did incur. While we're not active in a lot of projects right now, we did spend approximately $130,000 in the quarter, and it was all 2019 carry forwards, including a couple vehicles, one being the rescue truck and another being a 3/4 ton truck for waterworks, as well as some costs that were settling from the prior year projects around the audible system and pumps at the complex. Given how significant labor is to the organization, we anticipated to be in the range of 50% of our operating costs. We felt it warranted a slide on its own to basically sort of get a feel, because it is such a significant driver of our business. As you can see, labor on the whole is relatively consistent quarter over quarter, but there are a couple areas in particular that we would want to focus in on to just touch on briefly, and that's our overtime in particular, which we are seeing a significant uptick within protective services or our fire department, which is vacancies within the department, as well as outgoing retirees who are utilizing vacation balances, and we have to cover as such. And similarly, over in TPR, it really correlates with the sick time you're seeing below. Given the influenza outbreak that they had and then COVID, they've taken a hard, firm stance on people and illness, right? And essentially sent them home, which is, of course, obviously requiring them to bring in more people on overtime to offset those shortages in the workforce. Now we'll have the department heads each take a few moments to sort of hit on the highlights of their respective areas, as well as a couple key metrics. And then feel free to ask any questions towards the end of the presentation, should you have them. Rob?
Hello? Can you hear me? Hello?
We can hear you, Chief.
Okay. The first sheet is just a breakdown of the call outs we've had for the first quarter. It goes through response times. It breaks it down. Inspections, training hours, public education, smoke alarm program, burn permits. Does anybody have any questions with anything they see there?
There,
Yeah.
there, Pat, on smoke alarm programs, it says 171. Can you kind of explain, because there's no other metrics for 2019. When you say smoke alarm programs, is that inspections, or is that at one point we did have an abundance of smoke alarms that we were actually handing out. Obviously, we didn't have 171. So can you just kind of clarify that one, please?
That's the program we started in September of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And we just go door to door checking to make sure people have working smoke alarms.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to clarify.
And then there's some nice colorful graphs of our call outs and our inspections for the first quarter of 2020.
Councillor Adams.
Yeah, through your worship to Rob. Have we developed some kind of policy on when to charge people for false calls? That was a recommendation from Master Fire Plan as well as the operational review. Has there been any developments in that area?
A new policy, and I hope to bring that forward at the next council meeting.
You know, on Councillor Adams' inquiry, these false alarms, are they mostly residential or are they commercial, industrial? Do you have is there a high number in any particular category?
No, it would be evenly spread out.
Yeah.
One more question.
Councillor Adams?
Yeah, just a last question for Rob, for your worship, is one of the Master Fire Plan recommendations as well was to have the fire department help out with property inspections, and it could be seen as a source of revenue. Has there been, are some of those inspections taking place in these metrics you're providing, or is that something to still happen?
That's something that's not included in these statistics.
Is it something that's happening though, or working towards?
Yeah, I've been in contact about what training the firefighters would need in order to do that. And I'm still waiting for some answers on that.
Thank you, Rob.
Good afternoon, everyone. Through the quarter highlights that I have is we implemented the public services request software. This software was basically implemented late October of 2019. There's some modification we want to perform with that to improve our reporting. As we went through the process, we've seen that there's some glitches with it, and we can modify this software to assist us better. As you can see, an average of 12 complaints per week in Q1 of 2020, which is similar to Q4 in 2019. So it's fairly consistent, and within 24 hours, we've been taking care of complaints about 45% in Q1. Also in Q4 of 2019, it was 31%. Some of these, it's fair. 50% because of the nature of some of the complaints. Some of the complaints were related to snow removal. So, we can't close these within 24 hours, like due to the nature of it. Also, we had 4 water breaks in Q1 because of the frost heaving and so on. The thing that the guys noticed when they're excavating at these breaks, back in the end of the day when the system was put in place, backfill material was basically the material that was dug up. So there's some major rocks in there that's close to the pipes and creating the issues with the breaks. In part of our highlights, we do have 10-year equipment plan that is under review. We're going to assess what is best for moving forward. There's going to be some adjustments with that. Also, the engineering design for Swastika project is moving fairly well. You will be seeing some drilling activities in the near future. We need to assess the rock that's going to be part of the project. We need to put a dollar value to that. So hopefully within a couple of weeks, that process is going to start. If you can, in the winter control part of my items, we do have 126 lane kilometers that we do maintain throughout the winter, which is basically 63 kilometers of road. And you see that there's a fair cost to maintaining those as per Q1. It was basically $2,000 per kilometer. Also, we're maintaining 14 kilometers of sidewalks, but we do have a system that's 150 kilometers of sidewalks. So we're just doing the major arteries during the winter months. So there's a fair cost associated to the sidewalk winter control, as you can see in the report. So there's, we do need to review the winter maintenance program and try to improve things to minimize costs as best as we can. I can answer any question that the council may have.
Mr. Roberti, just Mayor Pat here. Just one comment on the frozen pipes. Does that come under the water line breaks?
Yes.
That's pretty amazing that there was that low a number for Northern Ontario, especially Kirkland Lake, looking at the age of some of this piping and the cold weather that we do get.
Yeah, if you wouldn't have had those boulders as backfill material, you'd see less of those breaks.
It seems like a lot less than what I've seen in the past 5 years. At least haven't heard too many complaints about it, that's for sure. So that is good news, really. Any other comments?
Your worship, Eugene here.
Yes.
I have a question. The cost of roadway winter maintenance, dollars per lane from 2019. Now that's the fourth quarter. The difference is almost double. And then for the sidewalks, it's substantially more, 2,300 per kilometer compared to 187. It just sounds, those numbers sound a little off.
I can jump in. Sorry, Eugene.
Yes, go ahead.
In regards to the Q4, it's actually negative $187. And this is an accounting adjustment that's happened in Q4, I believe, to recognize some inventory levels on salt and stuff like that. And so it is very, very skewed. The interesting thing about compiling this kind of thing and looking at it from that perspective is it shows us, that we do need to capture things and adjust appropriately. And so
you're saying it was captured last year?
It's an adjustment that we made. So you're getting a lump sum credit to the expenditure in Q4 that's drawing it down into the point of it being a negative expense. So this would not be a good comparative.
And if I can jump in, Your Worship, one of the really rewarding factors of this type of system is it assists in management and oversight and openness and transparency so that we catch these types of anomalies, and it steers us toward addressing the real concerns, and it also assists council with your oversight role to highlight and have confidence in the fact that management is on top of this. So as we progress, you're going to get better quality data and information, and the comparators from year to year are going to improve substantially as well. So very proud of this presentation on behalf of staff and Mr. Gorman.
Thank you.
Is that the end of it for Mr. Gorman?
I have a question.
Councillor Adams?
I also love the metrics. It's really important that we have them. Thank you very much, Keith and staff. So since we figured out since in 2019 for winter control, cost was around 6,365. Is there a goal that we're going to set for 2020 to spend less, or Is this how we're going to be doing it?
It is a metric we'll likely take into consideration as we work with Michelle to finalize that budget. I think it's a good way of understanding it, and we'll probably get some historical trending as well to better understand.
Absolutely.
All right, through your worship, I'll give you a bit of an update of what's happening from a development services perspective. We did proceed to award the contract for the zoning bylaw update to Jail Richards. We met with them just last week. We have bylaw enforcement that issued about 287 parking tickets and about 41 warning tickets is on top of that. We have modified the parking bylaw to increase parking in the downtown core. And you can kind of see that the building and planning is a little bit slow at this point. It's mostly allotted to the fact that it is winter. We don't typically see a lot of building and planning activity taking place in January to March. We do anticipate that will be further hindered with COVID-19. At this point, we are not able to issue building permits with the government orders the way they are. So we will be providing the public with a little bit more information on that within the coming few days. So in terms of cemetery, nothing is open there yet. That's planning on coming, we're opening it up in May. So we should start to see some movement there within Q2. In terms of bylaw enforcement, I know that there are some questions from council on that and the chart that was provided. Just making it clear that there was 40 activity requests received within the first quarter. There's still 14 open at this point. And the 14 open could be activity requests that were opened prior to Q1 of 2020. And same thing with closed. We could have closed some activity requests that were open in let's say 2019. There was another question that came from council regarding a comparative to last year. I did pull the CGIS system, so I'm using two different systems, CGIS versus PSR. CGIS was not actively used during that time, and we also didn't have an active bylaw enforcement officer, but I was able to pull about 12 bylaw enforcement activity requests from Q1 of 2019. So I wouldn't use it as a fair comparator, but that is the number that I was able to kind of pull up for you. Other than that, we will be seeing quite a lot more leases happening this year, I think, versus in previous years. Our bylaw enforcement officer has done some, as soon as someone complains about any type of encroachments on a laneway, she typically will look at the entire laneway and recognize that there are several other people encroaching as well. So we are seeing a lot of people come in with requests for lease or encroachment permits to utilize that portion of the unused laneway. So we should start to see a little bit more revenue coming in that way this year than in previous years. Other than that, if anyone has any questions, I'm more than happy to respond.
Through your worship to council, I will touch on some of the quarterly highlights to start off with. So our facility did close on March the 16th. And when we look at the days leading into March 16th, we found that our numbers were actually decreasing a number of days prior to that. So we had about 20 days during the month of March in which use was either nil because we had a closure, or it was very, very limited. And that is some of the main reasons that you saw back on the revenue charts for the decrease in revenues that were not related to the grant that Keith pointed out. We probably noticed about $6,000 per week that we're noticing difference in revenue. Some other highlights: we took a new approach for swimming lessons. We were not able to satisfy the demand as much as we thought we had in 2019. We looked at a new way of programming. So our new way of programming includes trying to put our instructors' availability and the parents' availability in different time slots. So rather than restricting classes to certain times, we were as flexible as we could be with both parents' time slots and with instructors. And we also offered fewer lessons per session, which people seem to be able to commit better for. We also had a successful adult swim class. That was very encouraging to me. We have not offered that in over a decade. Our moving program that we offered, it was an affordable access program. It had incredible success. We started off 3 days a week right after school with one indoor activity, one outdoor winter activity, and with one pool activity. We've been implementing our provincial swim admission standards, and the reason that I say that it does create challenges is if you have a child who is not able to pass the swim test and they are under the age of 10, they must be swimming within arm's reach of an adult. So that is challenging for parents who would like to do a drop-off. People are learning. This is a provincial standard. We're no different than any other pool. It definitely creates a safer environment. In terms of some of the metrics, I'll pick out some of the highlights. If you take a look in the aquatic center, our swim lesson registration was up quite a great deal from Q4 2019, and that was just a new way of programming. Take it our daily visits, they're down from Q4 2019. The main reason is that Q4 also includes Christmas break. So our numbers during the break are very high, and we'll see that probably even out more in Q2. No, we won't see it in Q2, hopefully Q3. In the areas of fitness programming, you'll see that there are differences in terms of fitness revenues, down up a little bit in Q1 2020. And it just depends. When you're looking at fitness revenues, it comes from memberships, it comes from daily admittance, and it comes from passes. Ice surface revenue is down a bit. That's probably due mostly to the closure of the facility on the 16th of March. If you take a look over to the next page, we've got some visuals for you. The first one is, where do the dollars come from in the revenues? And this will be different depending on the season. It probably will be most effective to look at it at year end. So as Keith suggested earlier, this is a snapshot. So obviously during ice season, you're going to see great uptake. When we look at a different season, when we don't have ice in, that will be obviously a lesser amount. So for the first snapshot, our ice surface was utilized the most, followed by aquatics, followed by fitness. We do get a lot of revenue from ice users. So there's also a graphic here. As you can see, it's our user groups who create the most of it. Minor sport, minor hockey is the greatest renter of the ice, followed by both skating club and junior hockey. And then we have different leagues, depending if whether they're rec league or old timers league. The other would make up our single users. So that would be the family who comes out to rent the ice for a family function or a birthday party, our pickup hockey, and our public skate. And at the top right, you see a bar graph with the equipment rentals. These have been very successful year after year. So the reason, as a reminder, that we have equipment came from a grant through the Sport and Recreation Communities Fund. We were able to purchase all of the equipment for skate skiing, junior skiing, adult skiing, and snowshoeing for both children and adults. We do allocate some dollars every year in the budget for repairs. The repairs have been minimal over the years. We've replaced a few bindings on skis, poles as they've snapped, things like that. The uptake from the community on the equipment rentals is huge, very, very much appreciated. And I'm open to any questions that you may have.
Councillor Adams.
Yes, through your worship to Bonnie. Bonnie, in the last quarter, we changed a Saturday swim, open swim from adults to having access to the leisure pool for kids. Has there been an increase in usership from that, or has there been a positive change?
There has been positive change on that. We track all of our swims, and what we notice is that the family swims on the weekends, and it is logical, but there is huge uptake to that. So if anything, we are going to be looking at increasing those numbers, because that's when people seem to have the time and the desire to come out to the pool.
It's good news. Thank you.
No problem.
Any further questions? None noted. Economic development.
Thank you. Through you, your worship. Quarterly highlights, provincial funding was secured for the Kirkland Lake Gold Expansion Project, roughly $698,000. Come North Planning Conference in February. It did serve as a first step towards development of local relocation and attraction project. Obviously, we have to wait to see what's happening with the funding agencies as we go through COVID-19 first, but I think that we have a good chance of putting that together with some local partners. COVID-19 initial business survey was well received, and we went through that. I think the next steps really are to try to put the necessary pieces together to actually assist the community in the region to plan for post-COVID recovery. HN service delivery, the review, as I will state in my subsequent report, it has been redone and substantially completed, but we do have to add in some additional information as came through with the review with the CAO. The metrics are unlike the metrics in the other areas because it's difficult. It's more of a qualitative assessment of the activities as opposed to a quantitative. I did try to do that. I tried to put the metrics in place that apply to the different areas that we'd be working within, regardless business development, community development, etc. It's a challenge. I contacted other EDOs and they face the same difficulties. The kind of metrics that you normally see from larger centers, impact on the vacancy rate within the downtown area, or impact on average wages, etc. We don't have the data on a local level like that. And I don't think that we see that kind of impact. So I'm looking for council's guidance as well as to what is it that they would like to see. I think I've put together a set of metrics that reflect what my colleagues are using in other communities and that they have found has worked well. Leave it at that.
Mr. Haas, if you're still there, one
Yeah.
question. I know we had a workshop a few months back as far as with the Economic Development Committee. Obviously, with this COVID situation, there's been a delay in coming back with not necessarily an action plan, but some guidance to move forward. I know there has been a preliminary report done. I think we probably should be in the position to at least finalize that report. And once COVID is, we're back to normal, then we can move forward with that. I will contact the Economic Development Committee. I did recently kind of give them an update of what we've been doing and some of the reasons for the delay. So I'm sure they're anxious to move forward, and I certainly don't want to lose interest in their activity and commitment to that committee. So it's at the top of our priority list, and I know you and I've discussed it, so we'll move forward with that as soon as we can. Just want to let council know what we have been doing. Any other questions with economic development? None noted. Administration.
So within the administration department, when you'll see the numbers, everything is fairly on par. The only big difference that showed up would be under the lottery licenses. I believe this would be to a lower number of bingos than usual. Some key highlights to note, working on creating a transparent agenda and looking into options for an agenda software in the future. And I've been working on creating an inventory of lottery licenses and just streamlining my process with those. Any questions on any of the numbers?
Noted.
And lastly, human resources. I'll speak on Claudette's behalf. A couple of the highlights for the quarter were onboarding of key personnel along the lines of CAO or General Manager of Public Works, or clerk or treasurer. We progressed continuously on the succession planning with council's direction and have started to successfully place positions within the fire department, treasury, and other areas. Just a couple of postings that were open towards the end of the quarter, one being the executive assistant and a second being a firefighter. It was a fairly busy quarter as far as hirings. 18 staff were brought on board throughout the quarter, and we had approximately 38 that were offboarded. Looking overall at our headcount, we did see a downtick from the end of the year, per se, where we were at 213 employees, and we're now down towards 184. If we go to the next slide, we've got it broken out high level, sort of by operating area. As you can see, TPR represents a big aspect of account. Are there any questions in regards to HR?
Yes, right here, Pat.
I can only see 4 participants. So is there any other
I have a
question?
question.
Oh, Councillor Adams, you're back on.
Through your worship to Keith, for the metrics, we have days injury free. I'm wondering if we're going to be counting report only injuries or first aid injuries as the injuries moving forward.
Thank you, Councillor. I did expect some questions. In all honesty, this is one that we'll coordinate with Andy. We just sort of ran out of time by the time we got to him. We have a couple of safety metrics that we believe would be valuable to be reporting, and we'd welcome your guidance in particular on that.
Only something out of interest would just be based on any investigations that we've done, how many, right? Because part of our job is the policy side of things. And if we have injuries, then we have to know what went wrong. So how many investigations we've done, just, I'm only one person though.
No, your expertise though is welcomed here, and we can coordinate something between Andy, Claudette, yourself to get some metrics around health and safety. I think they're critical to be reporting.
Thank you. Great job.
Any other questions, comments? Treasurer Gorman, just before we move to motion to accept the report, I want to thank you and on behalf of council for your leadership in the Treasury Department in completing this report. It's the most in-depth report I've seen in 5 or 6 years, and it gives us a good overview of what's happening in each department, and it's very much appreciated. And I know a lot of hard work went into it, especially in a short time frame to put this together. So congratulations, job well done, and thank you on behalf of council. We have a motion.
I have a motion moved by Casey Owens, seconded by Stacy White. Be it resolved that the financial and key performance indicator quarterly KPI report be received.
All in favor? Approved, unanimous. Item 6.4, naming rights. Ms. Sackrider.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to council. With this report, it is a follow-up from the regular meeting of council held on December 3rd. At that time, there was a recommendation from the Parks and Recreation Committee regarding naming. That following motion was put forth and defeated at the time. And at that time, council subsequently directed staff to investigate possible corporate naming right opportunities for Kirkland Lake. When we were doing the research, we found that across Ontario, there are over 70 parks, stadiums, arenas, centers, theaters, and the such that are named after a business. And there's a number of examples in the report. There has been a survey done in public sector marketing, and they find that most municipalities that have over 50,000 in population, they do engage a corporate sponsorship. So this led us to reviewing which municipalities do have policies and if they have dollar figures that go along with these policies. So by doing some searching and some phone calls to various centers, we found a number of different municipalities that do have their naming right policies that are available to the public. None of them do have a dollar figure associated with their naming rights. So they don't have a policy that says, if you give us so much, then you receive this in return. When you do a look at the population, it's quite evident that these are our larger centers throughout the province. So to take it to the next step, we want to see what are some of our Northern Ontario municipalities doing, and this was requested by council. So both the clerk and I reached out to the various networks that we work with in Northeastern Ontario. From the different municipalities that responded, and we did have a fairly good response rate, no one had anything in place. So this is something that when I asked the question, and when the question was asked by the clerk as well, a number of people said, please send us what you have. We would like to do this in the future. So perhaps we'll be the leaders on this. When you look back at how some of the larger centers have worked in the past, they typically are responding to RFPs for naming rights for certain buildings, or there are application forms that are available. So we wanted to bring this back to council at this time. It may not be the best time because of the downturn in the economics that we will probably see, to us to be very, we may not want to go with great interest into looking at doing naming rights right now. Not sure if this is the best time for solicitation. However, if there are people out there that are interested in donating money for any of the various buildings that we have in the municipality or parts of them, we do have a current policy on naming, and this was passed January 12th, 2016, which is attached. So we recommend at this point, if people are coming forth, that we would follow the policy that we have right now. Naming rights certainly can be a revenue stream, and I think it's something that we would like to look at in more detail as time goes on. It is hard to determine exactly what types of dollars could be seen by the municipality, because we're not sure who's out there and do we have benefactors who are interested in contributing funds. However, this is something that is certainly on our radar. We've talked about it in the past at our senior management levels, and we'd like to certainly review naming rights throughout the corporation, along with things like we talked a couple of weeks ago with the advertising opportunities within the facility. So we find that these all go hand in hand, and something that should be on the forefront as time goes on. So our recommendation at this point is that the report be received, but that we aren't going forward with aggressive solicitation right now. I'm open to any questions you may have.
Yes, Ms. Sackrider, one of your other notes in the report to council, the council may wish to amend the recommendation to staff be directed to issue an RFP for the naming of the buildings or areas as requested by council. Being that this, it may not be the best timing, but I don't know when it is the best timing. Being that this subject has been at council for probably 3 or 4 months, I think it was before Christmas. My recommendation, and I'd like to hear from council, is to go ahead with an RFP to determine whether there is any interest or not, and then we can move forward. We did, I shouldn't say we, I said I did commit to the Mavernack family that we would be moving forward in the new year. Obviously, the COVID situation has been a priority item, and we haven't gotten back to this. I don't think the timing is going to make much difference, but if somebody's interested, I think we'll find out one way or the other so we can move on and make a decision. I would appreciate some comments. Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Your Worship. As a farmer salesman, I wouldn't want to be out there trying to sell this to businesses that are operating at reduced scale due to COVID-19. I agree with Bonnie 100% that now is not the time to do this. As I said earlier in the meeting, it's not business as usual. As much as I want to see this go ahead, which I do, I think, you know, what Bonnie presented is I'm in full agreement with, that this should be put off until post COVID-19, and when businesses are back up and running, and we'll have full revenue streams and the ability to reach out and support the community more so than they can now. Thank you.
I respect that opinion. Thank you, Councillor Owens. Councillor Owens.
Yeah, I've got two comments on this one. First, I will second what Councillor Owens just said. I don't think right now is the best time to be going around the community with our hands out asking for money. You know what, naming rights, you can do what you want on that one, but for the commercial aspect of it, I think we need to wait. Bonnie, I was just going over the policy again. I don't know if it's something that we should look into for future buildings or future names of buildings, just to make sure that we've got a very stringent name or vetting process to check on the backgrounds of the name we choose. We've got one building right now within the town of Kirkland Lake that after 40 years is going under a name change because of things that were done in the past. I wouldn't want this council or future councils to be in that same position where we have to change the name of a building because of something has surfaced in the media. So I think somewhere in this naming policy that maybe at a future date, it should come back to us and have some modifications brought to it to make sure that this doesn't happen.
Thank you, Councillor White.
I actually back Councillor Owens on this point. I think we've reached our point in history where choosing to name buildings or property belonging to municipalities or governments or school institutions after any individual is very unwise. We've seen multiple cases within the last 5 years of historical personalities being raked over the coals for decisions that were appropriate at the time, but not now. And accusations that come up years after a person's death. It is an unfortunate reality of today that maybe we should be looking to create a policy that does not support naming buildings and property after individuals any longer.
Duly noted, Councillor White. I have to agree. We can check a person's background out from one end of the earth to the other, but as Casey noted, 30, 40 years later, you find out that they were not the person that we thought they were. And it's a risk that we don't need. I know for the school itself right now, it's very troublesome for them, and we don't need that. I sympathize with them for what has taken place, but that's a big risk. Councillor Owens.
Just to my final thought on that, it's not just troublesome, it's expensive. Like the dollar figure came out this week, how much it's going to cost the school board to rebrand our building, and it's insane. It's insane the amount of taxpayer dollars that have to go into this. So just we have to dot our I's and cross our T's before we jump into this venture. And that's it.
I agree. Councillor Perrier.
I have to tend more to agree with Councillor Owens on this, because I understand what you're saying, talking about these people who you find out years and years down the line that maybe they didn't deserve it, but there are an awful lot of people out there that did an awful lot of things that do deserve it to be recognized. And I think that under those circumstances, I don't think we should drop this. I think we should move forward with it, with what Councillor Owens had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor, any other comments? Can we have a motion then to, was that Councillor White?
Yeah, sorry, just on a side note here, I don't know how this report ended up being 61 pages. We don't usually get, not that I don't enjoy the reading, but we don't usually get items from an entire past meeting included in reports. I don't know if that just was an accident, but thank you for all the extra information.
Well, I have to agree. I think it's information overload to some extent. And when you get this on a Friday afternoon and spend your weekend, well, it helps put you to sleep at night when you get 189 pages. So I don't think we need that much background information on a lot of these, some of these subjects, I should say. So maybe we have a motion to accept the report.
Yes, through you, your worship. Would you like me to add into the motion for staff be directed to update the naming rights policy? Or would you like to just have the motion to be received?
I think that would be a great idea. I hope
Absolutely.
the rest of council would agree to that, and it'll move the process ahead. And that's kind of what I was hoping we would do.
Okay, so the motion is moved by Eugene Ivanov, seconded by Patrick Adams. Be it resolved that report number 2020-CS-003 entitled Naming Rights be received, and that staff be directed to update the naming rights policy.
Questions, comments? All in favor? Unanimous? Thank you. Item 6.5, concession services, Ms. Sackrider.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to council. We are recommending at this time that rental fees for the concession services at the community complex be waived for the time that the community complex is closed to the general public, or until such a time that reopens, or May 31st, 2020, which is the end of the current contract that we have right now. Right now, we have a contract with Polly James. She was a successful bidder from the June 1st, 2016 to May 31st, 2020 timeline. It was an original 3-year term, and council granted a 1-year extension last year. Ms. James did contact the municipality through the clerk and did ask for some relief for paying the full monthly rental amount due to the closure of the facility due to the pandemic. The letter is attached for you to review. It's not quite the same timeline what she's asking for, but I think we just have to be clear that the current contract does expire May 31st, 2020. A new RFP will go out to allow people within the Kirkland Lake area or the surrounding area to bid on this service. It will be a bit tricky just because right now I don't think people are going to be bidding on something while we're closed. So we just have to be cautious and make sure that we are ready to go close to the time that we are able to reopen. Or we may put it out early and have a longer deadline for people to be able to respond to it. So at this point, what I would be recommending is that from the time that we are closed, that we waive her fees in full until either May 31st, which is the end of the contract, unless we open prior to that. What the financial considerations are, the contract generates $800 per month. So for this time period of about 2.5 months, it would be approximately $2,000. Now there could be greater financial considerations if we remain closed past this timeline. So if we remain closed in June, perhaps in partially through July, it would not make sense that people are bidding on a contract for canteen services when they're not able to offer that. So the financial considerations may be greater. We just aren't able to forecast that at this time. Open to any questions?
Councillor Adams.
Yeah, certainly in favor. It only makes sense, to be fair, that if we shut down the facility on them and they can't make money, then we have to kind of support them on that. So I'm in support of this.
Councillor Ivanov.
Yeah, I also agree with that. We shouldn't be charging them for something they can't make money at.
I concur as well. Councillor White. Oh, Any other comments? Councillor Perrier.
I don't know if it affects the skate sharpening guy, but if it affects him, should he be considered the same?
The one thing that we'll keep in mind with skate sharpening is that we were close to the end of the ice season. So we probably, we would have been open for about approximately 2 more weeks. So we will certainly take that into consideration, Councillor Perrier. Thank you for that recommendation.
Thank you.
Good point. Can we move to a motion then?
Motion moved by Rick Owen, seconded by Stacy White. Be it resolved that report number 2020-CS-004 entitled Concession Services Recreational Facilities be received, and that monthly rental fees be waived in full for the time period of March 16th, 2020 to May 31st, 2020, or until such time that the facility reopens, whichever comes first.
All in favor? Oh, any comments? No?
Should
All
we
in
not?
Go ahead.
Sorry,
Go ahead, Councillor.
I apologize. Should we not amend this to include the skate sharpening guy in the, I mean, that's unfair. Otherwise, Bonnie will be acting on her own without the direction from council.
Good idea.
Might as well deal with it now. I agree. Are you in agreement, Bonnie?
Yes, that's completely fine.
So through you, your worship, to Bonnie, just working on the wording here, or to council, sorry. So staff be directed to waive fees for the skating sharpening, or to contact him, or what would we like to say?
How about this, your worship? How about, and that Ms. or staff be authorized to forgive payments for leases post March 16th when the facility closed. And then that gives Ms. Sackreiter the authorization if someone comes forward to grant that request on behalf of council. Would that be acceptable?
Councillor
Owen? Does that mean that anybody's renting space in there, like minor hockey and figure skating and gold miners? Does that mean they get their rent free too?
Through you to your worship, it would only be for applicable leases that would have lost revenue as a result of the building closure. Any rentals were not issued invoices for services not rendered.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay,
ahead,
so I'll
Owen.
reread the motion. Moved by Rick Owen, seconded by Stacy White. Be it resolved that report number 2020-CS-004 entitled Concession Services Recreational Facilities be received, and that monthly rental fees be waived in full for the time period of March 16th, 2020 to May 31st, 2020, or until such time that the facility reopens, whichever comes first, and that staff be authorized to forgive payments for leases post March 16th, 2020.
Yep. All in favor? Unanimous? Passed. Item 6.6, Heritage North Preliminary Service Delivery Review Update.
Thank you, through you, your worship, to council. On the March 24th meeting, the interim facility administrator provided an update on the review, and it was a resolution was passed by council with the understanding that the review would be presented at the April 7th meeting in 2020. The review is almost complete and is in its review phase with senior management. We would like to extend this to make a presentation to council on May 5th. And that would then allow us to include additional information that may be useful to council as they determine what to do with the facility, but also how it ties into the corporate service delivery review. Thank you.
To you, Mr. Haas, I did have a brief discussion, just a verbal discussion with the CAO yesterday, and I think council will be pleased with the alternatives that I just heard some preliminaries, and I made a suggestion as well. Not that I was privy to the report because I haven't seen it, but just from our brief conversation, I think it's going to make a lot more sense to council as to what opportunities we have and what we can consider. So we look forward to that report. Any other comments? We have a motion to accept that report.
Motion moved by Dennis Perrier, seconded by Casey Owens. Be it resolved that memorandum number 2020-ED-002 entitled Heritage North Preliminary Service Delivery Review Update be received, and that the final draft of the service delivery review be presented to council at the May 5th, 2020 council meeting.
All in favor? Approved, unanimous. Item 6.7, Deputy Chief Building Official and Property Standards Officer appointments. Ashley Bilodeau, Manager of Land Development and Planning.
Thank you, Your Worship. As you are aware, the Building Code Act stipulates that every municipality is required to have a chief building official appointed by bylaw. Recognizing this, I think it was back in March, the building department only has one qualified staff member, so we did retain the services of RSM building consultants to conduct building and property standards related responsibilities for the town. Staff were aware of the scheduled absence in March, and we did plan accordingly. We did arrange for the deferral of certain permits to April, and we're able to arrange virtual inspections for projects that are already in the process of construction. Unfortunately, however, CBO's absence has been extended for an undetermined amount of time, and there's a need to proceed with in-person building inspections and property standards orders. So in order to do so, RSM has actually reached out to a CBO in Timiskaming Shores, Clayton Seymour, to determine whether or not he was able to do some inspections on his behalf. So currently right now we have 2 roof collapses. I think we actually have a third that was just brought to our attention that need to be addressed, and a plumbing inspection that has to occur as well. And without in-person visual inspections, orders to demolish buildings with roof collapses are likely going to be revoked in court. So it's absolutely essential that site visits be conducted in order to issue these orders and have these matters resolved. So in terms of costs, having Clayton Seymour do it at a Timiskaming Shores is a lot better of it's a better financial it's better financially for the town of Kirkland Lake. Because of COVID, we have some issues with trying to get the building consultant here. So they actually quoted us a $6,000 cost to visit Kirkland Lake for inspection purposes. Whereas if we get Mr. Seymour to come and do the inspection, it's roughly $800, and he'll actually group a whole bunch together. So it's not going to be a bunch of visits at once, or a bunch of individual visits. We'll get charged once, but all the inspections taking place within that day that we have piled up. We do have a plan for the future. We have posted a building inspector property standards officer posting, and we are hoping to attract a qualified building official. And our intent is to train that individual to assume the CBO role. And once the current CBO retires, he'll take over that position. So if we do have 2 certified building officials on staff, the full intent is to cancel the agreement with RSM building consultants. So for the purpose of dealing with the property standards orders that we currently have to address, and to complete the inspections that we currently have halted for him to be able to come here and do those for us and meet the legislative requirements, we are recommending that Clayton be appointed as CBO for the town of Kirkland Lake.
First, I think I'd like to thank the municipality of Timiskaming Shores for sharing the CBO. That certainly helps us out, and it sounds like, in your opinion, it's at a reasonable cost, and we can move forward with these inspections as required. Any further comments from anybody? I have a motion to accept that report.
Motion moved by Stacy White, seconded by Rick Owen. Be it resolved that report number 2020-Dev-011 entitled Deputy Chief Building Official and Property Standards Officer Appointment Clayton Seymour be received, and that an appointment bylaw be presented to council for passage to appoint Clayton Seymour as Deputy Chief Building Official and Property Standards Officer.
All in favor? Unanimous, passed. Item 6.8, unencumbered bylaw enforcement. Ashley Bilodeau.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to council, municipal bylaw enforcement, as you're aware, is currently provided through a contracted service by Protection and Detection Services. And on April 7th, we informed council that the town's bylaw enforcement officers are refraining from issuing tickets and instead issuing warnings to individuals who are non-compliant with the town's bylaws. More notably, she's been distributing notices to property owners throughout town, and just their notices to let them know that spring cleanup is fast approaching, and we're hoping that they will take advantage of it. And they will be doing follow-up inspections shortly thereafter. So the town has seen a very relaxed approach to enforcement in the past, and that was witnessed by an energetic approach to enforcement activities in October of 2019 when PADS began enforcement. Tickets were starting to get issued regularly and property owners were being instructed to clean up properties, and it did result in some disorder among the residents. So what we'd like to do is prepare members of council for inquiries from residents receiving these notices and potential tickets in the future. We've developed a step-by-step approach to how individual members may deal with constituents to ensure that the bylaws are fairly enforced for the public at large. So in order to enforce bylaws, it's important for it to be done in an accountable and transparent manner, and that they're enforced consistently to all members of the public. Failure to do that will result in long-term damages and to the enforcement system in Kirkland Lake. Enforcement is of law at any level of government is a system built upon trust. Encumbrances at the administrative or political level can jeopardize or undermine this democratic institution. It's important that the public not lose confidence in the justice system or recognize bylaws are not being enforced fairly or at all, so that enforcement doesn't lose any credibility. Staff and council do play a very important role in the bylaw process. Staff is responsible for making recommendations related to bylaw approval to council, and council is responsible for reviewing and adopting the bylaws that residents wish to see enforced. The language which we are trying to work on in the bylaws should be very clear and concise to avoid confusion at the enforcement stage. So once a bylaw is adopted, typically it comes back to council or comes back to staff for implementation and enforcement. So at the enforcement stage, we've been clear with our enforcement officers that they take the following steps when approaching violations. That they're first to provide warnings on first occurrences, second to converse when possible with the offender to inform him of the violation, and three to recommend options to remedy the non-compliant situation, and last but not least to issue a ticket when enforcement deems appropriate. To assist council when dealing with constituents who are contacting them regarding to a ticket or bylaw violation, the staff are recommending that you be sympathetic, because it is very important for them to recognize that this is a new process for them. It is important for the constituent to know that there are options. That if the resident has received a ticket, the options may be found on the back of that ticket. If a notice has been generated and the resident requires clarification, it's important to contact the bylaw enforcement officer, and her number is freely provided. It's available online. It's available to councillors. I think she's got business cards that can be distributed. They could also call us here and we can provide them with the necessary information. If the resident is confident that the ticket was issued incorrectly and fairly, contact again the bylaw enforcement officer. They have been instructed to use best judgment when ticketing. However, there are extenuating circumstances where an enforcement officer is not aware of. In those instances, she does have the ability to revoke the ticket. It is important to note that staff and or council does not have the authority to revoke a ticket. The only individual who has the authority to revoke a ticket is the enforcement officer who issued it. So failure to respect this is considered an obstruction of justice and could result in charges under the Criminal Code of Canada. So it's very important that we don't get involved and let the bylaw enforcement officer process the tickets as she deems fit. If council does not support the content within a bylaw, certainly a motion may be passed by council to amend the bylaw or to repeal the bylaw. So we've seen those come forward at the council table on multiple occasions with the parking bylaws. If there is things that need to be changed, we can certainly look at those and bring those to council and make it a black and white approach to enforcement. So as the summer months approach, we are warning you that there will be warnings and potential tickets issued in relation to the community standards bylaw in an effort to clean up the town. Individual members of council may be contacted to involve themselves in this enforcement process, We want to protect you and we want to protect our staff. The enforcement process in Kirkland Lake is important. We are recommending that a motion be passed by council to support the step-by-step approach listed above and to avoid any encumbrance with the enforcement process. Is there any questions at all from council?
Ashley, Mayor Pat here. I want to compliment you on the excellent job you've done on this. It's very thorough. It's to the point, and I think it clarifies council's involvement, or shouldn't be any involvement in the process. We often get caught one time or another. I'm sure each councillor, it's happened to them. I know it's happened to me. People are coming to you and trying to get a ticket revoked. That's not our job. And I think highlighting it today in the manner in which you have it's clear to the public that people do have options, and it's also it's clear what our role is in the process. The bylaw enforcement officer's position is probably the toughest job within the municipality. I wouldn't want it. So I think we have to show the respect for that position and let them do their job and not get involved. Any further comments? Councillor White?
I just wanted to let you, Ashley, and the bylaw enforcement officers know there's actually a surprising amount of support they're receiving online and in the public about their job they're doing. It seems that everybody supports the bylaw officer until they get the warning. But you're doing an excellent job. They're doing an excellent job. We've been without bylaw enforcement for quite a while. It'll take a while for the public to get on board, but it's going to be a positive thing in the end. So great job, everybody. Councillor
Owen. S.
Yeah, it's a bit like what you said and Councillor White said. I love this report. When I read this on Friday, the message was very, very clear. There was no hints about it. I think it's clear that council needs to stay in policy and not get into operations. And I just want to say that bylaw enforcement and staff are doing an amazing job on this site, on this aspect. Kirkland Lake does need to clean up, or certain residents in Kirkland Lake need to clean up their properties. And I think we're on the right track with this policy. People need to just follow the rules and clean up your properties.
Thank you, Councillor Owens. Councillor White.
Sorry, another thing to add is I think the community may benefit from an education blitz. There was actually people saying, I don't know what rules I'm breaking. So I don't know, just my suggestion is if Discover KL could put it out on Facebook, or we could have a link to 17-005, which is the community standards bylaw, right on the front page of our website, just so that people know what rules they're breaking. That would be great.
Good idea. Any other comments? We have a motion to accept the report.
I have a motion moved by Eugene Ivanov, seconded by Dennis Perrier. Be it resolved that report number 2020-dev-012 entitled Unencumbered Bylaw Enforcement be received, that council approves the step-by-step process presented in this report, that an unencumbered municipal law enforcement process is hereby adopted by council, and I can add that staff be directed to post bylaw, most frequently ticketed bylaws to our website.
All in favor? Passed.
Actually, Your Worship, we don't need to add that last section. That's one of the things we will do with the website to ensure that that's on there. So we don't want to just interject that at the end before the mover and sector may have had an opportunity to actually agree to any additions.
Yeah. Are we okay with that motion and seconder?
Yes.
Okay. Can I just add one thing? I know preached in the past about putting a human touch to, as far as the bylaw enforcement officer. And when you get your statistical report, Ashley, I don't know whether you get this or not, but it would be nice to know the number of bylaw offenses that have been revoked or ripped up, basically. So just, that's not to go in the motion, but just a suggestion. So we know, we can see that as well. Councillor Ivanov.
Yeah, Your Worship, I think it might be, if you happen to be on the radio, I know you do that at times, it might be a good idea just to mention that we have a bylaw enforcement officer and that they're going to be enforcing bylaws, and that, you know, that's available on the web for people that don't have access to either computers or whatever. And then, and, you know, and tell them that we support that, and that people have been complaining forever, and now we're finally doing something about it. And they, you know, that it should be something they should be happy about, not upset about.
Good point. We'll keep that in mind. Okay, are we okay with the motion to go ahead? Maybe you could reread that motion, Megan?
Sure.
Thought it passed.
And sorry, just to clarify, so it's moved by Eugene Ivanov, second by Dennis Perrier. Am I including that last sentence, or would you not like it included?
Don't include that, no.
Okay. So moved by Eugene Ivanov, seconded by Dennis Perrier. Be it resolved that report number 2020-Dev-012 entitled Unencumbered Bylaw Enforcement be received, that council approves the step-by-step process presented in this report, and that an unencumbered municipal law enforcement process is hereby adopted by council.
All in favor? Unanimous? Thank you, Ashley. Oh, we're moving on to 6.9. You're still on.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to council, this sort of ties into the last report. PADS, the enforcement or the contract responsible for bylaw enforcement, has acquired a body camera for the use of the bylaw enforcement officers. So according to PADS, there has been a number of threats and inappropriate behaviors targeted at the enforcement officers. So the owner is hoping to address these threats and inappropriate behaviors by equipping the law enforcement officers with body cameras, and they're hoping that it'll reduce the incidence of threats and inappropriate behavior. It'll also help with collecting evidence in matters proceeding to court. So the owner does have a legal obligation in accordance with the Occupational Health and Safety Act, provide a workplace free from violence and harassment. And the town is also arguably responsible for ensuring that we support PADS in their pursuit of a workplace free from violence and harassment. So we are very much in support of improving the working conditions of our bylaw enforcement officers. However, we do have a few reservations, and this comes from just doing a little bit of research at our end in terms of implementing a body camera for these enforcement officers. So the things that came up were privacy related, technological related issues, like such as the storage of videos, necessary time frame to keep the videos, access to the videos, potential video corruption and how that plays out in court. There's data collection and proprietary rights to the video, propriety rights, so I apparently can't say that word. Administrative responsibilities as well in terms of downloading the videos, storing them in an appropriate and secure database, and the ownership of the data. So in my rationale section of the report, I won't get into all of these, but there are several benefits and challenges that are associated with this. And in order to try to mitigate the challenges and make sure those benefits are realized, we came up with a list of recommendations. Should council be supportive in proceeding with the implementation of body cameras on our enforcement officers? We are recommending that the development of a process to monitor the impact of the cameras be done, looking at workload, office availability, officer injury, use of force, public complaints, and resolutions in court. We are looking to develop a policy with clear direction about when the body-worn cameras should be on and when they should be off. There's very important legislation that comes into play that you're not allowed to use it in private homes. It's very important to have them on during enforcement investigation situations and making sure the public's aware of when those are on. and when they will be recorded. So making sure, like I said, procedure-wise, we're providing proper notice. We'd also recommend an agreement with PADS to confirm who owns the information and the storage of the information. As a municipality, we need to be sure that we're satisfying the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Acts. That's extremely important to me. We want to make sure that in that agreement, they are keeping the data secure and it's accessible should someone ask for those videos. Also, cost analysis. I'm not necessarily too sure whether we'll have any impact financially as a result of implementing this program. I'm assuming the majority of the financial impact will be with PADS, but it is nonetheless something that is of importance for me to look at in providing a decent recommendation for you moving forward. There may be costs associated with training, storage of videos, cost of vetting videos, and then resolving technological challenges. So I do think it's very important for them to proceed with body cameras. Just based on the type of behavior that we've seen happen with our bylaw enforcement officers. Although we do want to make sure that we're not putting ourselves in any liable situation by either using them incorrectly or not having them available under the Municipal Freedom of Information Act. So again, happy to take any questions or concerns. I did communicate this with the detachment commander of the OPP, so I've been in communication with him. And they are in the process of trying to find me a policy that I can use in municipalities that have implemented body cameras on enforcement officers. So I'll be able to pull some information from there as well.
Councillor Adams.
Yeah. The Office of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada has a great references to the use of body cameras. But in the aspects of PAD's obligation to provide a safe workplace, body cams is maybe a last resort. Have they provided training for conflict resolution? Have they provided any type of administrative controls in the meantime without having to get to body cams, right? Because that's, in the end, that's truly the behavior between the two people. The body cam only records that. But if it's about providing a workplace safe of workplace violence and harassment, have they provided training for their individuals?
Through your worship, yes, I do believe training has been, training was definitely completed in terms of the bylaw enforcement aspect of it. Conflict resolution, I am about 75% sure that that has taken place already, but I don't have proof of it. So I would, I'd have to go back to the contractor to pull any type of documentation that would indicate that she had been trained.
And are you aware, Ashley, through your worship, if they've used body cams before, PADS? Because like using the Office of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada website, maintaining privacy and locking in the information and retention of it, is this something that they'd be capable of, or? Right.
Sorry, through your worship, are you implying to PADS specifically, or are you implying in general in Ontario?
Well, it would be PADS who would hold the body cam like footage, I believe, no? Or
through your worship, yes, it would be PADS. That's part of the agreement that I'd like to have with them, is to determine who's going to be responsible for all of the little information that goes with implementing this process. I don't know whether or not PADS has body cameras on in other areas. I'm not sure.
Councillor Owens.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the body cam as long as the privacy issue can be looked after. I think as a council, before we make any decision on this, we should get an opinion from our lawyer as to what our responsibility is and as to what our potential liabilities are. I don't think any of us on council has the expertise to do that. As well, just to mention, I keep getting a message that I have an unstable internet connection. So if I disappear, I haven't got mad and left the meeting. It just means my internet went down. Thank you.
Your worship, maybe I can help out quickly. I think all the points, and through you to council, your worship, I think all the points are very valid, and the recommendation being brought forward by Ms. Bilodeau is for staff to review this matter. No action will be taken until this is thoroughly reviewed, looked at, and investigated, and the training component will be reviewed with PADS, and this would be a last resort. So we're hoping to find solutions before we return to council with a report recommending the body cams and looking at all of that, if that helps out.
Yeah, one other comment, Rick. I believe the bylaw enforcement officer is a peace officer or officer of the law. And this may be covered under that. And I think we might be able to get some guidance from the chief at the OPP office. Hopefully we don't have to spend money on a legal opinion, but that might be another avenue to look at as well, because I do believe they have the same authority as a peace officer, the same as a officer with the lands and forests, or whatever you want to call it, rangers. Anyway, just comment. Any further comments? We have a movement to
A motion moved by Patrick Adams, seconded by Rick Owen. Be it resolved that report number 2020-dev-013 entitled Body Cameras for Bylaw Enforcement Officers be received, and that staff be directed to work with PADS to prepare a cost analysis and policy, including an information management agreement with PADS and standard operating procedure for use of body cameras on bylaw enforcement officers in the town of Kirkland Lake.
all in favor? Approved, unanimous. Revised item 6.10. Who's speaking on that behalf, Megan?
Through you, your worship, that will be for Ashley Bilodeau.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, which one?
This would be the added agenda item, Ms. Bilodeau?
Yes,
And it would be the...
Sorry, yes, yes, my bad. Okay, so we had, we received, we were in the process of doing the, sorry, let me wrap my head around this one again. We were in the process of getting the demolition permit ready for the property that we recently vested, 2 Premier Avenue East. This property had a roof collapse on it, and we are in the process of vesting. Unfortunately, the ownership has not yet transferred from land registry. We're expecting that to happen at any point. So while we were doing the demolition permit, we recognized that there was a need to sign as an owner. We would be, the town of Kirkland Lake would be the registered owner of the property. And unfortunately, because we do not have a delegation of authority bylaw, we would, staff are not able to sign on behalf of council. So this is something that needs to go to council for a decision to be made. In order to prevent this type of thing from happening again, we are suggesting that a delegation of approval bylaw be considered at council at a further date at another council meeting. We will bring something to council for consideration. It's likely that we'll have other things that, in order just to simplify the process of little things like that, like building permits and funding agreements in certain instances, to give us the approval to just sign off on those and limit the amount of things that may be coming to council and maximize your time more and make it more efficient. So that's essentially the report in a nutshell. The request for council is to simply give me the authority to sign off on the demolition permit for 2 Premier Avenue East once it comes into our name. So that's all that's being presented to you today.
Okay. Any questions, comments? None noted. Motion to.
Through you, your worship, for the mover and seconder, I have for the previous 6.10 was going to be Casey and Eugene. Are you guys okay to be the mover and seconder for this newly 6.10?
Sure.
Okay. Perfect. So moved by Casey Owens, seconded by Eugene Ivanoff. Be it resolved that memorandum number 2020-dev-001 entitled Delegation of Authority to Premier Avenue Demolition Permit be received, and that the manager of planning and land development be delegated authority to sign the demolition permit application on behalf of the town of Kirkland Lake to expedite the demolition of the vacation abandoned building at 2 Premier Avenue East in the town of Kirkland Lake.
All in favor? Unanimous, passed. Item number 7, consideration of notice of motions, none noted. Item 8, introduction, reading, and consideration of bylaws. A motion?
Motion moved by Dennis Perrier, seconded by Rick Owen. Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read a first, second, and third time, numbered, passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, and the seal of the corporation be affixed thereto. Bylaw number 20-040, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 15-017, being a bylaw to regulate parking in the town of Kirkland Lake.
All in favor? Stacy? Approved? Sorry.
Moved by Eugene Ivanoff, seconded by Stacy White. Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read a first, second, and third time, numbered, passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, and the seal of the corporation be affixed thereto. Bylaw number 20-041, being a bylaw to appoint a deputy chief building official and property standards officer.
All in favor? Approved, unanimous. No other motions noted. Questions from council to staff. Question from Councillor White.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to council. So I'll do my best to answer the question, recognizing that if council wishes to pass a motion to receive the answer and direct staff to provide a written response for the next meeting of council or a future member of council, we certainly appreciate that. So the basic premise of the question was with respect to the changes to the agenda for the corporation of the town of Kirkland Lake. So I took the liberty of going back to March 5th, 2019 and reviewing the agenda from that meeting. And it is essentially the same as the agenda format for the March 3rd, 2020 council meeting that the question compares to the March 24th council meeting. So in review of the March 3rd, 2020 council meeting, as I advised council at the March 3rd council meeting, there's a foundational concern with respect to the agenda layout of the town of Kirkland Lake council agendas. And it stems from agenda item 13, which is the adjournment to an in-camera meeting. And it doesn't provide a great deal and hasn't provided a great deal of openness or transparency in the past. Not to mention the fact that council was actually adjourning the council session in a closed meeting and not rising from closed session, confirming the proceedings of the meeting, and then adjourning the meeting following that. So I advised council at the March 3rd meeting that we should address that and make amendments. Following the March 3rd meeting, as everybody knows, COVID-19 pandemic began and things changed rapidly. The March 17th meeting of council was canceled and we moved toward the March 24th meetings of council with the 17th scheduled to the 24th, but the addition of the emergency council meeting on the 24th commencing at 4:30 p.m., which was designed and intended to bring forward the Bill 187 amendments to the Municipal Act and incorporate them into council's procedural bylaw to allow council to hold its meetings by electronic means. And staff provided a report to council with respect to the Bill 187 amendments to the Municipal Act and the proposed amendments to the Town of Kirkland Lake procedural bylaw, including the attachments of the Bill 187 from the province of Ontario and the proposed bylaw amendment, which council will note is bylaw number 20-034, to amend the procedural bylaw for the Corporation of the Town of Kirkland Lake, which is bylaw 15-075, which is council's procedural bylaw. That amending bylaw brought forward the Bill 187 amendments to allow for electronic meetings. And also staff recommended as part of those amendments to the procedural bylaw that item 1, and we actually highlighted, staff highlighted the amendments to the headings in the procedural bylaw for a regular council meeting. Number 1 was previously listed as a moment of silence. We recommended that council add in call to order and moment of silence. And then item 9, questions from council, which was contained on the March 5th, 2019 council agenda and the March 3rd, 2020 council agenda, was not contained within the procedural bylaw. So those agendas were not compliant with council's procedural bylaw. So we made recommendations in the bylaw to amend the procedural bylaw to bring the agenda template into compliance with what council was actually doing on the agendas. And I understand the motion was made by council following the inaugural meeting to include questions of council to staff as a heading section within the agendas, but it was never formally amended within the procedural bylaw. So we're trying to do that housekeeping to ensure compliance between the actual agendas and the procedural bylaw. We changed section 13 and added closed session, which now appears as part of the open session agenda, and council resolves into a closed session, an in-camera meeting. And by doing so, council is providing due notice to the public that there's going to be a closed session. And we're even identifying the items that are going to be discussed, being as open and transparent as we possibly can without divulging exactly the details of what council may be discussing for obvious reasons, such as if council were looking to purchase land, you wouldn't want to divulge what land you were looking to purchase and allow developers or private individuals to purchase that land ahead of council and add premiums onto it, affecting your ability to do business. In addition, staff recommended that item 14 be added, matters from closed session, so that council would have the opportunity to report into open session any matters that occurred in closed session that council would like to move in open council or just report to the general public what actually had happened. So then we moved on following the emergency meeting where the bylaw, the procedural bylaw was amended to the March 24th agenda, where those headings were included on the March 24th agenda. And we also took the opportunity to include on the agenda all of the motions so that from an openness and transparency perspective, members of the public could actually see what was being recommended by staff underneath each report. And this is a very common practice you will see with all modern agenda software, that there's the opportunity to include the recommendation, and then that folds right into the minutes as part of those agenda platforms to create the minutes and motion sheets and various things like that. So reviewing all of that information, it would be staff's submission that there hasn't been that drastic a change in the actual agenda. The procedural bylaw was amended to support what council is actually doing and what, in staff's view, improves the openness and transparency of the actual council agenda so that the public has more knowledge and information just from looking at the agenda, as well council can take a quick look at each agenda item before they get to the report and say, I understand exactly what staff is recommending, and I have a pretty good understanding just from the front agenda sheet what is occurring. We also understand that there was a little bit of a concern with respect to the software platform that staff was using, that once you clicked on a link to go to a report from the agenda, you had to scroll all the way back up. So the clerk has taken the opportunity to include a back to top button on each report or each agenda item that we hope assists. And if there's other suggestions, we'd certainly love to hear them to see if we can implement them to make it easier for council and the general public. But we saw these as all very positive improvements to the agenda to increase openness and transparency and usability. So if there's questions, Your Worship, or if a motion to create a written report is requested by council, we'd be happy to answer any questions or provide a written report. Thank you, Your Worship. That concludes my answer. And sorry for being long-winded.
If council will permit me, I will give you my own personal view. When you're chairing a meeting, I must admit, I didn't find the new process user-friendly, but that could be me. And I did ask the clerk to make some changes to assist me in keeping on track. And what she did is basically, we did get the original format that you're talking about, but she also gave me a separate agenda that leaves out the motions, but the motions are on a separate sheet. Hopefully, I think council will agree. I think things are going fairly smooth with this meeting tonight. And one of the reasons was the changes that Megan made for me. I think they would be of benefit to council. I realize having the motions on right on the agenda, it's maybe a little more transparent, but it's not the most user-friendly approach, I think, especially for the public. Now, I may be wrong on that, but that's my personal opinion. I will say, Megan, what you did for me has helped a heck of a lot, and it might be of benefit to other council members as well. Open for discussion. Any other comments? Councillor Owen?
Yeah, I kind of like having the motions included with the agenda. But my problem is not so much the change in the agenda, but it used to be when you looked at the agenda on the computer and it was underlined, you pressed and it went straight to that report. And we've lost that. Now you have to go through all the reports. And I find that time consuming and somewhat annoying. That's just my opinion. But in terms of having the actual resolutions written on the agenda, I personally like that.
Yeah, if I may comment on that, Councillor Owen, I agree with you, especially if you wanted to print out a certain section of the attachments. You end up getting 189 pages.
Yeah.
That's not what we want. Perhaps the pages could be numbered, and where you can go in and say, okay, print page 19. That's what I need. That would help from that standpoint. And I think if they're numbered as well, it's a little easier to get to that page a lot quicker. But that's just my comments. Councillor Ivanov.
Yeah, I've had Megan print off everything for me, and you know what? It's just easy to follow for me. It's easy because especially with doing these virtual meetings, she just prints it off, boom, pick it up. Then I get to look at everything, and you know, I don't find this any more difficult than the other way. But I mean, it's nice to have a hard copy as opposed to. I'm not sure how Patrick does it. I know Patrick's the computer guy, and he's going through and looking at everything on his laptop. I would find that impossible to flip back and forth on pages, so the hard copy makes it so much easier to follow. My comments.
I have the same thing done, Councillor Ivanov, so I know where you're coming from. we're all at different stages of the IT aspect.
I should say I used to print off my own, but when you start getting 100 pages, it's a lot better if Megan prints it off for me.
Yeah. Any other comments or concerns? Councillor White. Next, Casey.
Yeah, so my only concern is, are we doing the agendas for the several of us that sit at meetings, or are we doing it for the public and their convenience and their ability to follow along and flip back and forth? I have gone over several different, about 30 other municipalities' agendas, and they range from recommendations and saying it's recommended to, as this new format with the resolutions printed, to our old system of clicking on reports. I have asked members of the public what they feel, and I've received calls from other members of the public. There is an issue with the lack of ability to share single reports or to pick up single reports and go back and forth. For instance, I was on page 43 of report 6.1, and I had forgotten what I was supposed to be thinking about because it was so many pages, and it was the minutes of a different meeting that didn't have to do with the exact topic, and I had to scroll all the way up to get to what I was supposed to be thinking about myself. So I would just like the ability to be able to share chunks of the document rather than, like, this meeting was 58 pages. So if there was a way to work that, I would really appreciate that myself.
So, Your Worship, through you to council, I am certainly not the expert when it comes to this agenda platform. I'm more used to AllNet and eScribe and iCompass, which is remarkably user-friendly, but I'm certain that the clerk will be more than able to improve this to make it better. The additions of the buttons, I understand were a good addition, but I think the links should be working as well. So if Councillor Owen is having an issue, Your Worship, we can try to look at that, because you should be able to click on each report and go to. I think the problem is going back and then how user-friendly each segment of the agenda may be. So we'll take a look at that for sure.
Councillor Owens?
Yeah, two things on that. It just dawned on me when Councillor White was speaking that there is a way that you can print off just a part of a PDF section, but that's for a separate conversation. My issue is, or it's not really an issue, it's just a question, is why in this agenda do we have all these minutes of entire meetings being attached to, like, if I take the naming committee, like, why did we need the entire minutes of that entire meeting just for that particular item? That's my only question on this one.
Certainly, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to council. So council can blame me for that. One of the things I like to do is, when staff is putting forward information, we want to try to be as comprehensive and provide all of the information as possible, so that anyone picking up that report can see the basis in the background. Because while members of council may have the background and the understanding of what might have happened at a different meeting or 2 or 3 years ago, the average person who may be picking up the agenda for the first time may be interested in seeing that, or a member of council may just want to refresh their memory. So we want to provide as fulsome a report as we possibly can. If council would like us to stop doing that, we're certainly happy to, because it does create more work. But we want to be as diligent and as comprehensive in providing all of the information so that council has all of the information available to make the decision.
I think Councillor Owens brings up a good point, because quite honestly, with respect, without giving out too much information here, but with respect to the concession request, it went all the way back to the application process, including references and a whole bunch of other information. to make the decision that we had today, we didn't need all that. And 189 pages on a Friday afternoon for somebody to go through on the weekend, this is unusual. I think what we need is the basic information to come up with a reasonable decision moving forward. There may be times when we will request more information, but I'd rather see that than have to go through 189 pages. And I respect the fact we have been asking for more information and want to be transparent, but that honestly, this was information overload on a number of the topics today. Councillor Owen?
Yeah, I can appreciate what our CAO is saying about members of the public picking up and not having the history. But I think there's a medium ground here that can be found. For instance, we don't need, like, okay, to use the concession one, we don't need to know her references. We don't need to see her resume. We don't, and the public doesn't need that neither. We need to know that the contract was awarded on this date. Okay, that gives the public the background, gives us the background. And I'm not even sure we needed to know that for today's decision. But I think, you know, that our CAO does have a point that as counselors, we often have a background that the public doesn't. But I think there is definitely medium ground that can be found here where the public, you know, it was passed on this date, it was revised on this date, blah, you know, but, you know, reading minutes, I think some of those minutes I was reading were from 2016. Like, I didn't find it really relevant. And quite frankly, no, I'm not going to go there. I didn't appreciate it. That's all I'm going to say, because I don't think to accept the report that we saw and make the decision we made, we needed all that information. And I would like to see common sense prevail when we do this. And yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Councillor Adams.
Yeah, I've also just received some negative feedback from the public in regards to the new agenda lineup, especially with the size of it and clicking all around. But I certainly understand the side of staff and doing their diligence and saying, well, council accepted it and council voted on all these other past items. But for user friendly of the public who we're supposed to represent and ensure that they are also informed, it just gets a little mudded for them when they have to like scroll through so much past information rather than just get into the meat and potatoes of what's actually being discussed. But that's the comments I've been hearing from the public as well.
Yeah, the changes that you recommended or we put in place on the agenda that weren't in there in the past, there's no objection to that, because obviously we want to be compliant, and so that's not an issue for sure. I think it's just the content and the user friendliness of the report. Councillor White.
Well, and that's the thing with our old system, we definitely did have the openness and transparency. We did have the resolutions as a page itself at the end of the reports so that members of the public were aware of what the recommendations were. They didn't have to be on the agenda themselves. I understand that it is helpful to the mayor that it's all laid out so that you can kind of check the boxes. And I'm sure when anybody else chairs, we'd appreciate that as well. However, I don't think this falls under transparency because the way we did it before also included those recommendations or resolutions rather.
Through you, your worship, to council. Just wanted to clarify one of the reasons why we changed from the the links in the opening of a new page is with our new website, we will not be having that platform anymore to do that process. So within the next month, it just won't even be an option for us. So in the interim between now and hopefully moving towards an agenda software, this is the options that we've been playing with. So just wanted to update it. That was why the change happened there from the individual links. There definitely is a way to just get one page, and I'll explain that to you guys in an email, to either print or to even just save it to your own desktop.
Okay.
And of course, going off of what Rick said, the motions being built into the lead sheet, as I call it, is the majority of agenda softwares that does help with the functionality of all the next steps for creating the minutes and doing follow-up and that sort of thing. So right now in the interim, we're trying to move towards the steps that will come about with the agenda software.
So Megan, just to clarify, then this whole process may change again. If the agenda software is being used. Am I
Through you,
correct?
your worship, yes. I don't know what that is going to look like at the moment, and it does take several months to implement and working with the companies, but you generally can build it to your liking and what works for you, but there are definite defaults to follow as well. And as a general, usually what would happen with these softwares is that each member of council as well would have an iPad or a tablet of some sort that they can follow along within the agenda app. And it allows you to make comments on each page and do it just like it's a printed page in front of you.
Okay. Councillor Owens?
Yeah, I too work from hard copy a lot, and I appreciate that Megan prints it off for me because I do not have a printer at home. So without the links, I have to go through that whole thing to find what I'm looking for. And I just find it time consuming and not user friendly at all. If you have a printer and she says there's a way you can do it, blah, 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 that's all fine and dandy, but I don't have a printer. And I just find that not being able to just click on a link and go to the specific report I want to see is not, I mean, I know I'm in the minority here because most people do have printers, but as far as an iPad and all that stuff, I got a desktop computer. That's all I have. That's all I need. So those are my concerns. And like I say, they're just my concerns because I don't have a printer, but I just thought I'd mention them. Yeah, but I do appreciate the work that Megan does in printing it off for me every week. That's great. Or every council meeting, that's great. I do appreciate that. Thank you.
Councillor Owens, you'll be happy that you don't have a printer because if you're printing off 189 pages, it's going to get awful expensive. So don't buy one.
Yeah, just remember my heritage is Scottish, so maybe that's why I don't have a printer.
Okay.
Be careful where you go with that one, Councillor Owen.
Okay. We have a motion to accept the response.
Yes, I have a motion moved by Patrick Adams, seconded by Casey Owens. Be it resolved that the question submitted by Councillor White regarding changes to the agenda be received.
All in favor? Unanimous. Notice of motions, nothing submitted. Councillors' reports. Councillor Owens. Owen.
Yeah, I just thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to commend the local businesses for the extra effort that they're putting in to protect the public. Various businesses are doing it in various ways in Kirkland Lake. Personally, I'm self-isolating. I only leave the house when I have to. But I really appreciate the effort that they're putting forward to protect the public and to protect their own staff. And I'm speaking for myself, but I'm sure the rest of council would echo my my thoughts on this. And as was mentioned earlier in the meeting, it's very important if we are going to beat COVID-19. It would be very easy to say, well, there's only been 12 cases in Temiskaming. Well, that's a wonderful thing, and we need to keep it there. And the only way we can keep it there is to follow all the recommendations of the federal, provincial governments and the Temiskaming Health Unit. This is a very serious virus, and it's scary to me, and from two perspectives. One, you can have it and not even know you have it, and you go out in the community and you can be quite innocently spreading it to others. And the other thing that really concerns me is that it is spread so easily. So I just really, when I go out, I usually go for a drive because I am getting cabin fever, and with my mental health issues, that's not a good thing. So, but I just really, really want to ask the people of Kirkland Lake to continue following the recommendations that are based on the best health science, medical science available. And if we all do this together, we will be able to defeat COVID-19 faster, and we will be able to get back to our normal lives again. We're all making sacrifices here. And I really feel for the business people as well, because some of them have had to close. They have absolutely no income. Others have reduced income. And I just want them to know that the community is supporting them. And I'd like Kirkland Lakers to really check out what they can get locally, because if these businesses close, when life gets back to normal, we're not going to have much choice in Kirkland Lake, and we need to support our businesses, especially now. And I just thank you for this opportunity to express my my concerns about COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owens. I will totally agree with you, because the report, the survey that was done, and potentially 32% of the businesses that participated in that report could potentially close. That would be a huge loss to the community. So we need to, as you said, support our local businesses and in a safe manner. Councillor Adams.
Yeah, I just want to say a big thank you to certainly our staff during this time, and especially our essential and frontline workers out there. Certainly keep up the great work. It's certainly difficult times with the precautions that need to be taken in place. For the parents at home with children, I certainly feel you. I used to have hair last week. No. But it's certainly different times at home, and certainly finding activities to do for kids, paint the windows, say thank you to the essential workers, maybe try and pick up a garden, donate that food to a food bank is certainly another good choice to do, just to find some time. But keep up the good work, everyone. It's different times, and we can all do it together.
Councillor Ivanov.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Kirkland Lake Gold, who drove around town with hand sanitizer that they had contracted some local distillery to make, and dropped off at every business that was open downtown. Certainly, and in gallons. So they were very generous, and I think anybody that was open or is going to open, I mean, Kirkland Lake Gold was very, very generous. Thank you.
I'd just like to, if Chief Adair is listening, and Michael Riverty, for the job that the fire department did and our works department with regards to the fire on Government Road. They saved the building. and the contents that's been around for a building that's been around for probably 90 years next door. And within a couple of days, the cleanup was done. I'd like to compliment the owner of the buildings as well, because he wasted no time and asked us to go ahead and compensated us immediately after. We've had issues where this doesn't happen. And it's a real compliment to our fire department and our works department and the owner of that building. So a big thank you to all three groups. Any other comments? Additional information, item 12.1. Perhaps.
If I might, Your Worship?
Yes, I was going to ask you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So when staff receives requests such as this, we will place them on the agenda to be received and give council the opportunity to decide how they wish to dispose of them, rather than staff speculating and wondering whether council may support one and not another. And we don't want to put council in a position where we make a recommendation that council may not wish. So our thought process is put them on to receive and let council dispose of them the way that council wishes. And we do have recommendations if council would like to support to assist you with that. But we didn't want to put you in a bad position on any of these items. So if that sounds like a sensible way to approach this, Your Worship, we'll continue the practice in the future.
Okay, do you want to discuss item 12.1?
Me, Your Worship?
Yes.
Thank you, Worship. We as staff see this as a very positive opportunity to support a local club who is providing great service on behalf of the community. And my own personal belief is that every dollar you give to a volunteer is equal to $7. They can stretch a dollar by 7 times. So by supporting the Horticultural Society and the hard work of those individuals, it's going to improve the aesthetics of Government Road. And I think we all need that this year more than ever, coming out of COVID-19. And we want to make Kirkland Lake as beautiful as we possibly can. So from staff's perspective, we certainly support it, Your Worship. And it is included in the operating budget in the amount of $5,000, I believe.
In regards to the amount, I thought they had come back with a smaller amount that they said they could live with. Is that correct, or am I wrong?
I believe they're requesting $3,000, Your Worship.
Yes, yeah.
We have $5,000 included in the proposed operating budget.
Okay, I'm hoping council, I'll wait for other comments, but hopefully we could support to that so they can go ahead with the purchase. Councillor White was first.
Sorry, it takes me a second to unmute. Of course, we definitely, I definitely support this. The Horticultural Society has been doing downtown beautification for many, many years. I know in the past, our former clerk has kind of ran a program where you could pay money, volunteer. I donated money myself last year to the cause in my family's name. So to recoup the cost, I don't know if that's something the town is interested in doing again, but having $5,000 to the Horticultural Society is just excellent, and I definitely approve.
Councillor Perrier?
No.
Councillor Owens?
Yeah, just to be clear, I think they are asking for $5,000 for a total for 2020 in the budget and $3,000 until we get the budget passed. So the full amount is the $5,000 they will need this year. Just a clarification.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Owen?
I don't like spending money, as council knows, but in this particular case, it's amazing the work that they do. I try to grow flowers and they don't look like anything that you see downtown. Let me tell you that. And for them, it gives them such joy in doing it. I think we would be foolish not to include that in our budget. It just makes all the difference downtown, and I really appreciate the work that they do for the citizens.
Agree totally. Could we direct staff to pre-approve them at least on the 3,000 to go ahead so that they can order those flowers? Is there any objection to that?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, we have a proposed recommendation. If council would like, we can actually just include it as the $5,000 and let the Horticultural Society just get to work. So the
Yep.
clerk has a motion if you'd like, Your Worship.
Yep, thank you.
Through you, Your Worship. So I do have a motion. During this conversation, I was trying to go back through some minutes. I believe we previously have already passed a motion to put this in the operating budget, but the letter itself is requesting to pass a motion to say that we go forward with purchasing the flowers before the budget is passed. So I do have a motion to receive, as well as that council approve the purchase of flowers before the passing of the 2020 operating budget up to $3,000.
And I think we could go 5,000 with
Go
that if
5,
council's
yeah.
comfortable.
Yeah.
Okay, I was going to say, assuming that afterwards they still had 2,000 to spend once it was passed, but we could do up to 5,000.
Yeah.
Okay. So the motion is moved by Rick Owen, seconded by Eugene Ivanoff. Be it resolved that correspondence from the Kirkland Lake Horticultural Society regarding the purchase of flowers be received, and that council approve the purchase of flowers before the passing of the 2020 operating budget up to $5,000.
All in favor? Unanimous. Item 12.2. Ashley, would you like to speak on behalf of that resident complaint?
Yes, certainly, Your Worship. Through you to council, we did receive that letter or that memo regarding some concerns on temporary shelters. We do plan on looking at this in our zoning bylaw. So as I mentioned previously, we met with the consultants last week and did about a 4-hour review of our zoning bylaw to try and find areas that need some improvements or just changes in the language in order to better enforce. Temporary shelters did come up, and she is going to be looking at other municipalities for enforcement strategies related to that. So whether it forms part of our zoning bylaw or we bring another temporary shelters bylaw to council for consideration, we will certainly be looking at this and bringing something forward shortly.
Yeah, if I may comment, Ashley, I thought regardless whether it was portable or full
Fixed.
a full foundation, whatever, that there was setbacks from the lot line that had to be followed. So I guess I'm a little naive on this, but I was surprised that this is not in place, or is it?
We recommend, sorry, through you, Your Worship, to council, we do recommend that they be 2 feet away, but when it comes to an enforcement aspect, the structures don't meet the definition of a building or a structure in our zoning bylaw. So then it becomes extremely challenging if you try to take it to any sort of enforcement level. This is something that we are definitely looking at. Certainly if somebody comes in and asks where it should be located, we would tell them to be two feet from the property line. That's in line with our zoning bylaw or guidelines for residential properties. But when it comes to the enforcement of it, it becomes a little bit more challenging.
Okay, so at this point, you are working on it. We don't need to direct staff to go further, but you are going further as we speak.
Yes.
Okay. Any other comments? Do we have a motion to accept the additional information, or is that sufficient?
So I have a motion to receive, as well as I can add to be directed to implement regulations within the zoning bylaw update. Would you like me to read it all as a whole?
Okay, please.
So motion moved by Dennis Perrier, seconded by Stacy White. Be it resolved that correspondence from Mike Howie regarding the provision of portable shelters be received, and that staff be directed to implement regulations related to portable shelters as part of the zoning bylaw update.
Okay. All in favor?
No.
Passed unanimous. Item 13, closed session. No closed session in this meeting. Matters from closed session, obviously none. Confirmation bylaw, motion.
Motion moved by Rick Owen, seconded by Patrick Adams. Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read a first, second, and third time, numbered, passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, and the seal of the corporation be affixed thereto. Bylaw number 20-042, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held April 21st, 2020.
All in favor? Passed unanimous. Before we go to confirmation bylaw, go ahead with confirmation bylaw.
Through you, your worship, that was the motion we just passed.
Okay, sorry about that. Adjournment, before we go to the motion, I'd just like to thank fellow councillors for the professional approach we've had to these meetings, especially doing them online. We're getting better each time. So thank you for a very professional input there today. Made the process go, I think, quite smooth. We're improving every time we do. Go to motion, please.
Motion moved by Janice Perrier, seconded by Casey Owens. Be it resolved that council adjourn the April 21st, 2020 regular meeting of council.
All in favor? Passed. Thank you.